My adult children feared my new love, Arthur, believing he was after my inheritance. They sabotaged our relationship by spreading rumors and lies about him to my friends and even his former colleagues. In response, I disinherited them, leaving my estate to Arthur, choosing genuine happiness and companionship over their selfish greed. Ever had a similar experience or thoughts on this story? Leave your comments below and consider subscribing for more tales of life and relationships. The scent of honeysuckle, thick and sweet, clung to the late afternoon air as I settled onto my porch swing, the rhythmic creak of the chains a familiar lullaby. The swing, a gift from Thomas on our 30th anniversary, was painted a cheerful robin's egg blue, a stark contrast to the deepening shadows that now stretched across the lawn. The sun, a flamboyant artist, was beginning its daily descent, painting the western sky in audacious strokes of fiery orange, soft rose, and fading lavender, a breathtaking canvas of light and color that always brought a quiet peace to my soul. Each evening, this glorious spectacle played out over the rolling hills of my sprawling backyard, a silent balm to the quiet solitude that had become my constant companion. It had been 5 long years since Thomas, my anchor, my dearest husband, had slipped away quietly in his sleep, his hand still warm and reassuring in mine. 5 years of waking to an empty space beside me in our king-sized bed, its vastness now a poignant reminder of his absence. 5 years of quiet meals at a dining table meant for 4, its polished surface reflecting only my own solitary reflection. And 5 years of a solitude that had begun to feel less like peaceful contemplation and more like a heavy, suffocating cloak, slowly but inexorably tightening its grip. My children, Sarah and Mark, were good kids in their own way. Or so I repeatedly told myself, a mantra whispered to quell the persistent doubt that gnawed at me. Sarah, my eldest, was a high-powered attorney, her life a dizzying whirl of demanding court dates, prestigious charity galas, and an endless stream of professional networking events designed to elevate her already soaring career. Her office in the gleaming downtown skyscraper was a testament to her ambition, its minimalist decor and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline speaking volumes about her success. Her carefully curated social media presence, filled with impeccably filtered photos of her dazzling smile and perfectly coiffed hair, was a public reflection of her polished, perfect life. Mark, the younger, was an equally successful real estate developer, always on his phone, brokering multi-million-dollar deals and overseeing gargantuan construction sites that dotted the burgeoning city landscape like colossal Lego sets. He drove a luxury SUV, always the latest model, wore tailored suits even on weekends, their fabric impossibly smooth, and spoke of his latest acquisitions with an air of detached pride, as if discussing chess pieces rather than properties that would reshape neighborhoods. They called, they visited, but their presence often felt more like an obligation, a box to check on their impossibly long to-do lists. Their conversations were clipped, punctuated by glances at their expensive watches, their minds clearly elsewhere, already planning their next power lunch or analyzing their next lucrative investment. I understood, intellectually, they had their own lives, their own pressures, their own ambitions. But understanding didn't quite fill the echoing quiet of my large, increasingly empty Victorian house, nor did it soothe the persistent ache in my heart that longed for genuine connection, for more than just dutiful attendance. Then, one brisk autumn evening, my vivacious friend Carol practically dragged me to the annual autumn leaves dance at the community center. "Eleanor, for goodness sake, you need to get out. You're turning into a recluse. Thomas would want you to live, to laugh again, to find some joy," she'd insisted, her voice bright and insistent, her hands on her hips in a gesture of loving exasperation that always managed to pierce my stubborn shell. I'd reluctantly agreed, pulling on my favorite sapphire blue silk dress, a relic from happier times, its fabric still soft against my skin. I felt like a ghost haunting a vibrant ballroom, an anachronism amidst the glittering lights and lively chatter. The music, a lively swing band, pulsed through the room, its infectious rhythm strangely jarring against my quiet, monochromatic existence. People laughed, danced with abandon, celebrated the simple joy of connection. I felt utterly out of place, an anomaly, a wallflower fading into the background. That's when I saw him. He was standing near the punch bowl, nursing a glass of sparkling cider, a silver-haired gentleman with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, revealing faint laugh lines that spoke of a life well lived. He wore a tweed jacket that looked perfectly comfortable on his lean frame, its elbows slightly worn, suggesting a fondness for books and quiet contemplation. His tie was a muted plaid, elegant yet slightly whimsical, hinting at a playful spirit. He was tapping his foot to the swing band, a gentle, almost hesitant rhythm, a quiet energy amidst the boisterous crowd. He wasn't flamboyant, didn't seek the spotlight, but there was an unmistakable dignity about him. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and he offered a small, polite nod, a faint, almost shy smile that warmed something deep within me. A few moments later he approached, his steps unhurried, a polite deference in his posture. "Mind if I cut in?" he'd asked, his voice a warm baritone, surprisingly clear amidst the din of music and conversation, extending a hand to me as the band struck up a slow jazz number, a smoky saxophone winding its way through a melancholic melody. His hand was slightly calloused, betraying a past life of working with his hands or perhaps tending a garden, but gentle, and his grip was firm, reassuring, a subtle anchor. We moved across the polished dance floor, not perfectly synchronized like seasoned partners, but with a comfortable, easy grace, a silent understanding passing between us, a shared rhythm that felt remarkably natural. We danced for what felt like hours, not speaking much, just moving, breathing, existing in the shared space of music and unspoken connection. The persistent weight in my chest, the nagging ache of loneliness that had become so familiar, seemed to dissipate with each gentle sway, replaced by a lightness I hadn't felt in what felt like an eternity. Later, over lukewarm punch that tasted vaguely of artificial fruit and an inexplicable hint of ginger, he introduced himself. "Arthur Finch," he said, his smile widening slightly. "Retired history professor from the State University. And you, if I may be so bold, are the most elegant dancer in this room, even if your steps sometimes betray a delightful, charming hesitation." I had laughed, a true, unrestrained laugh that surprised even myself, the sound bubbling up from a place I thought had dried up, a well long since depleted. "Eleanor Vance," I replied, my own smile broadening. "Widow, and a surprisingly good time, it seems, when coaxed out of my shell." He'd chuckled, a warm, resonant sound that filled me with a quiet joy, and in that moment I knew this was different. This wasn't just a fleeting encounter, this was a connection. This was hope. From that evening, a quiet, gentle friendship blossomed, nurtured by shared stories and a mutual understanding of life's quieter pains and joys. Arthur had a way of making me feel seen again, not as Thomas's widow, perpetually draped in the shroud of grief, or Sarah and Mark's revered but distant mother, a figurehead of their ambition, but simply as a leaner. He saw me, truly saw me, with all my complexities and quiet strengths, my vulnerabilities and my resilience. We discovered a shared love for old black and white films. His favorites were the witty, rapid-fire screwball comedies of the 1930s, mine the sweeping, romantic dramas of the 1940s, and obscure historical anecdotes, particularly those pertaining to forgotten European monarchies, which he recounted with delightful relish and an impressive memory for obscure dates. We shared a passion for the simple joy of a perfectly brewed cup of Earl Grey tea, consumed from delicate porcelain cups, and the quiet satisfaction of solving a particularly challenging crossword puzzle, often debating the precise meaning of a cryptic clue for several minutes before finally cracking it. We spent our days exploring dusty antique shops in neighboring towns, running our fingers over forgotten treasures, imagining their past lives. We'd pore over old books in the local library until the librarians, a kindly pair of sisters, gave us knowing smiles and gentle reminders that closing time was approaching. We picnicked by the sun-dappled riverbanks, sharing simple sandwiches and crisp apples, recounting stories of our lives, our losses, and the quiet dreams we still held close, dreams that now, inexplicably, felt attainable. Arthur was a widower too. He understood the quiet ache of solitude, the hollow echoes in an empty house, the strange sensation of a life abruptly rerouted. He listened with an intensity that my children rarely offered, his gaze steady, his questions thoughtful and probing, drawing out answers I hadn't realized I wanted to give, confessions of long-held fears and secret desires. He never once asked about my investments, my pension, or the size and value of my large Victorian house. He was interested in my thoughts, my memories, my very being. He saw a kindred spirit, a fellow traveler on the quiet road of later life, not a financial opportunity. "You look radiant, Eleanor," Arthur observed one sunny afternoon, his hand gently holding mine as we strolled through the sprawling botanical gardens, the air sweet with the heady perfume of blooming roses and damp earth. His fingers traced the delicate lines on the back of my hand, a tender gesture that sent a warmth through me, a quiet current of affection. "I haven't felt this happy in years, Arthur," I confessed, my voice a soft murmur, barely above a whisper, my heart light and buoyant, fluttering like a hummingbird's wings. The feeling was intoxicating, almost dizzying after so much quiet despair, so many years shrouded in gray. He squeezed my hand gently, his gaze unwavering, full of genuine affection and understanding. "Me neither, Alina. You're a truly wonderful woman, a breath of fresh air after so many years of simply existing, of merely observing life from the sidelines." His words, simple and sincere, warmed me more than the spring sunshine, settling deep into my soul, affirming a new, unexpected chapter. I felt for the first time in ages, truly cherished, truly seen, truly alive. One Sunday, during the ritual of their weekly dinner visit, a tradition that had long since lost its warmth and now felt more like a scheduled appointment, a tedious box to check on their meticulously planned calendars, I decided, with a cautious flicker of hope, to bring up Arthur. Sarah and Mark were seated at my ornate mahogany dining table, picking at their pot roast with varying degrees of enthusiasm, their attention already fragmented, their thoughts clearly elsewhere. Sarah, impeccably dressed in a tailored silk blouse and pencil skirt, a testament to her exacting professional standards, was recounting a particularly challenging legal case, her voice a rapid-fire monologue of clauses, precedents, and the intricate dance of courtroom strategy. Mark, in his expensive casual wear, a cashmere sweater and designer jeans, was already scrolling through emails on his phone, hidden discreetly under the table, his thumb dancing across the screen with practiced speed. "I've been spending a lot of time with a new friend," I began, trying to inject a lightness into my voice that I didn't quite feel, bracing myself for their inevitable, calculated reaction. "Arthur. Arthur Finch." I watched their faces, searching for a flicker of genuine interest, a hint of happiness for me. Sarah's fork clattered softly against her cherished china plate, the sound jarringly loud in the suddenly silent dining room. The sudden noise punctuated her monologue, and her shoulders stiffened imperceptibly, as if she'd just received an electric shock. Her perfectly arched eyebrows rose in alarm, a dramatic flourish of surprise. "Arthur?" she repeated, her tone sharp, almost accusatory, laced with an immediate suspicion. Her eyes, usually so calculating and composed in court, narrowed, scrutinizing me as if I were a deceptive witness on the stand. "Who is Arthur, Mom? Where did you meet him? Is he from here? What does he do? What's his background?" The rapid-fire questions felt less like an inquiry and more like a hostile cross-examination. Mark, ever the pragmatist, ever the financial calculator, put his phone down with an audible snap that echoed in the suddenly silent dining room, the sound like a gavel dropping. His gaze, usually focused on profit margins and investment returns, was now fixed intently on me, a mixture of suspicion, alarm, and thinly veiled disdain in his eyes. "Is he well off? Does he have his own money? Does he know about your investments, Mom? Has he asked about the house? What's his net worth? What's his pension like?" His questions were blunt, devoid of any pretense of genuine concern, solely focused on financial implications. I felt a familiar frustration, a dull throb behind my eyes, a weariness settling deep in my bones. It was the same weariness I'd felt when they were teenagers, debating the cost of a new car or a lavish vacation. "He's a kind man, a retired history professor, and no, he hasn't asked about my money. Not a single penny, not a single mention of finances. He just makes me happy." I kept my voice even, refusing to let their immediate suspicion rattle me, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing my distress. Sarah leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if we were discussing a delicate, potentially scandalous legal maneuver that required utmost discretion. "Mom, you need to be careful, you're vulnerable. There are a lot of people out there who prey on lonely seniors. They target widows, especially wealthy ones like you, ones with large estates. They charm their way in, gain trust, and then, well, you know, they can take everything. We just want to protect you from that." Her words, though carefully cloaked in concern, felt like a thinly veiled accusation, a dismissal of my intelligence, my judgment, and my newfound joy. They seemed to view my happiness as a liability. I sighed, a long, weary exhalation that deflated the last vestiges of my hope for their understanding, my last thread of illusion about their motivations. "I'm not a child, Sarah. I can make my own decisions. And Arthur is a good man, he's genuine, he's not after anything." Mark scoffed softly, a dismissive sound, tinged with cynical disbelief. Good intentions don't pay the bills, Mom. And good men don't typically sweep into the lives of women who have significant assets without some kind of motive. He's probably been watching you, researching you. He knows exactly what you're worth. His words were chilling, painting Arthur as a predatory opportunist, a calculating schemer. Their concern intensified with an alarming velocity in the weeks that followed, like a rapidly spreading infection. Their visits, already feeling like scheduled appointments rather than genuine family gatherings, became less about catching up on my life and more about subtle interrogations regarding Arthur. Sarah, with her lawyer's precision, became a master of insinuation, her words carefully chosen to plant seeds of doubt without directly accusing. She would casually bring up articles she'd just happened to find, online sensational headlines screaming about elder fraud epidemics and swindlers targeting vulnerable seniors. She'd leave them carelessly on my antique coffee table, often with particularly damning paragraphs underlined in bright red ink, as if for emphasis. "Just something to consider, Mom," she'd say, her eyes darting between me and the offending newspaper clipping, a thinly veiled warning in her tone, her gaze a silent accusation. Mark, meanwhile, transformed into an amateur private investigator, relentless in his pursuit of incriminating information. He'd pepper me with pointed questions about Arthur's past, his financial situation, his family background, his former employees, always feigning an air of deep, analytical concern, as if he were conducting a due diligence report. "Mom, we just did a quick background check," he announced one afternoon, holding his phone aloft like a smoking gun, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. Arthur used to own a small independent bookstore in Silver Creek that went out of business a few years ago. He declared bankruptcy once about 7 years ago, right after his wife passed away. "A financial failure, Mom, doesn't that worry you? A man who can't even manage his own finances can hardly be trusted with yours." His tone was laced with a triumphant "I told you so," a clear indication that he considered this damning evidence an irrefutable character flaw. I felt a fresh knot tighten in my stomach, not from worry about Arthur, but from the insidious, calculated nature of their campaign. Their determination to discredit him, to undermine my happiness, was truly shocking. His business failed, Mark. It was a small, independent bookstore, and the market shifted dramatically. Amazon came in, big chains expanded, online sales soared. It was a difficult time for many small businesses. It was a trend, not a personal failing. It shows he took risks, tried to pursue a passion, and faced a setback. That's life, Mark. Not everyone's a cutthroat developer who always wins. I tried to keep my voice calm, but a tremor of irritation ran through it. He shook his head, a dismissive gesture, his lips curling into a sneer. "It shows he's unreliable, Mom. A financial risk. He's probably looking for a new source of income, and with your considerable assets, you're an easy target. He's probably already done his research on your net worth, on every penny you have." His words were chilling, painting Arthur as a predatory opportunist, a calculating schemer whose every kind gesture was merely a calculated move in a larger game. The subtle attacks escalated into more overt manipulations, like a slowly tightening noose around my neck. Sarah, with a malicious genius for psychological warfare, would accidentally leave her phone open on the kitchen counter to a news article detailing a recent gold digger marriage in Florida, complete with a prominently displayed picture of a much younger man standing stiffly next to an elderly woman, their faces betraying no warmth. The implication was clear and cutting. Arthur was nothing more than a fortune hunter, and I was too foolish to see it. Mark, bolder still, began to actively spread insidious rumors. He would call my closest friends, my longtime bridge partners, even my hairdresser, subtly questioning Arthur's character, his intentions, his very morality. He planted insidious seeds of doubt in their minds, tainting my reputation in the process. My closest friend, Carol, called me one day, her voice tinged with apprehension and a hint of accusation, a reluctance to fully embrace the gossip but an inability to dismiss it entirely. "Eleanor," she began, her tone unusually hesitant, "Sarah called me. She was asking so many questions about Arthur, almost like she was digging for dirt, you know. She made it sound like you were being taken advantage of, that you might be getting scammed by him. She said he was a known bankruptcy case. Is everything all right, with Arthur? You seem happy, but they're making me worry." I felt a wave of shame wash over me, hot and stinging, not for Arthur but for my children. Their behavior was despicable. "It's fine, Carol." They're just being overprotective. I tried to sound convincing, to brush it off, but even to my own ears, the words rang hollow, an insufficient defense against the calculated malice of their campaign. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Much more. They weren't protecting me, they were protecting their inheritance. Their actions were less about my well-being and more about securing their financial future, ensuring their slice of the pie remained intact, untouched by an outsider. The true impact of their machinations became painfully clear one quiet evening, almost 2 months after that first contentious dinner. Arthur seemed quieter than usual, his customary twinkle absent from his eyes, replaced by a subtle shadow of hurt. We were sitting on my porch, wrapped in a comfortable silence, watching fireflies blink in the twilight, a moment that usually brought him immense joy, as he recounted whimsical tales of childhood summers and catching lightning bugs in glass jars. He traced patterns on the condensation of his iced tea glass, his gaze distant, lost in thought. "Eleanor," he began, his voice low, tinged with a weariness I hadn't heard before, a sadness that twisted my gut. "Your children, they've been quite busy, more busy than you know." I looked at him, my heart sinking, a cold dread washing over me. "What do you mean, Arthur? What have they done now? Has it gotten worse?" "They've been calling my old university, Eleanor," he explained, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. "Asking about my pension, my former employment records, my professional standing, trying to dig up anything discreditable. They even contacted my former neighbors in Silver Creek, subtly suggesting that I might be after your money, that I'm not to be trusted, that I'm a known opportunist who preys on vulnerable women. My old landlord from the bookstore, a man I've known for decades, even called me confused, asking if I was in some kind of dire financial trouble, because your son Mark had apparently told him I was in deep debt and looking for a way out." He sighed, a deep, heavy sound that seemed to carry the weight of his weary heart. He looked at me, his kind eyes clouded with hurt, a profound sadness that pierced me. "A few of my former colleagues, friends even, people I've known and respected for 30 years have called me sounding wary, distant. One of them, a man I've shared a beer with countless times, a fellow history buff, asked me outright if I was courting a wealthy widow to make up for my financial woes. He said your son Mark had implied as much, hinting that I was a con artist, a charlatan." I felt a surge of cold, righteous anger, sharper and more potent than any emotion I had felt in years. It was a searing indignation that brought a tightness to my chest, a burning behind my eyes. Their callous disregard for anyone but themselves, their willingness to smear a good man's name for their own selfish gain, was truly appalling. "I am so incredibly sorry, Arthur. I had no idea they would go this far, that they would stoop to such despicable tactics, such malicious slander. The audacity, the sheer nerve of them, the calculated cruelty of their actions, designed to isolate me, to drive me away from the only person who genuinely cared." He took my hand, his grip gentle but firm, his gaze unwavering. "I understand their initial concern, Eleanor, I truly do. Any parent would worry when someone new comes into their elderly parent's life, especially after a loss. It's natural to be protective, but this feels different, Eleanor. This feels like a coordinated, calculated effort to drive a wedge between us, to poison your affections for me, to isolate you from anyone they don't approve of, anyone who doesn't fit into their narrow, self-serving view of your life." He squeezed my hand again, his thumb stroking my knuckles, a gesture of reassurance that only deepened my resolve, steeled my determination. "And it's working, Eleanor. It's making me question if I'm causing you more trouble than joy, if I'm worth this kind of family drama, this constant shadow of suspicion. I don't want to be a source of conflict for you." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and the truth of it finally, brutally, undeniably dawned on me, a revelation that brought both clarity and a sharp pang of grief for the illusions I had held onto for so long. My children weren't just concerned, they were actively, maliciously sabotaging my happiness, systematically dismantling any potential for a fulfilling life that didn't revolve around their expectations. They were sacrificing my peace of mind, my burgeoning joy, my very emotional well-being, for the sake of their own perceived financial security, their inheritance. And I had been too blind, or perhaps too afraid, too hopeful to admit it to myself. The image of their faces, twisted by suspicion and greed, cemented my decision. This was the final straw. The next family dinner, a week later, felt less like a gathering and more like a theatrical performance, a brittle, tense affair. Sarah, meticulously dressed in a new designer suit, its fabric crisp and unyielding, perched on the edge of her seat, an unsettling rigidity in her posture. She regaled us with a tedious, overly detailed story about a new, complex legal case, her voice a rapid-fire cascade of legal jargon, clauses, and precedents, bright and artificially cheerful, as if she were trying to distract from the palpable tension in the room. But her eyes, whenever they met mine, held a hard, almost predatory glint, a silent challenge, a demand for submission. Mark, despite having his phone tucked away in his pocket, still radiated that restless energy about him, a silent hum of impatience and barely concealed irritation. He fidgeted, his foot tapping an imperceptible rhythm beneath the table. I watched them, their forced smiles, their overly polite chatter, the transparent artifice of their civility, and felt a cold, unbridgeable distance between us, a chasm that had opened wide and deepened irrevocably. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the suffocating weight of their calculated betrayals. I knew, with absolute certainty, what I had to do. The time for pretense, for polite evasion, was over. I waited until dessert, until the coffee was poured, its rich aroma filling the room, until the last bite of apple pie had been consumed. The clinking of porcelain cups and the rustle of napkins were the only sounds in the otherwise silent dining room, a tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. I reached for my water glass, my hand surprisingly steady despite the tremor that ran through me, a silent hum of adrenaline. My voice, when it came, was clear, though it felt distant, as if coming from someone else, a voice imbued with a newfound strength, a cold, hard resolve. "Sarah, Mark," I began, my gaze sweeping across their faces, holding their startled attention. "I need to tell you something. I know what you've been doing, everything, all of it." Sarah gasped, a small, dramatic sound, a perfectly timed theatrical flourish. Her eyes, usually so calculating and composed in court, widened in an exaggerated display of innocence, her hand flying to her chest as if she were truly wounded. "Mom, how can you say that? What are you talking about? What are you accusing us of? This is absurd." Her voice was laced with a feigned indignation, a desperate attempt to deflect. Mark, ever the strategist, ever the master of deflection and counterattack, chimed in, his tone a practiced blend of hurt and indignant outrage. He squared his shoulders, ready for a fight. "We're just looking out for you, Mom. We have your best interests at heart. You're being naive. You're elderly, Mom, and you're vulnerable. Arthur's just not, he's not right for you. He's clearly taking advantage of you. We've heard things, we've seen things, we have proof of his past failures." "My best interests," I scoffed, a bitter, hollow laugh escaping my lips, devoid of any humor. It was a sound that seemed to truly surprise them, rattling their composure. "You mean your best interests, don't you? Your fear of losing money, your insatiable greed. You're terrified that Arthur will somehow diminish your inheritance, that he'll take what you believe is rightfully yours. That's what this is about, isn't it? Your overwhelming, suffocating greed, your blatant disregard for my happiness." My voice, though not loud, carried an undeniable force. Sarah's face flushed a blotchy, angry red, her carefully constructed composure finally beginning to crack under the pressure. "That's a horrible thing to say, Mom. That's completely unfair, after everything we've done for you. After all the sacrifices we've made, we've always been here for you, always supported you." Her voice rose, becoming shrill, a thin veil over her simmering rage. "Sacrifices?" I retorted, my voice sharp, cutting through her manufactured indignation like a scalpel. "What sacrifices, Sarah? What exactly have you done? You visit once a week for a pro forma dinner, a brief, dutiful appearance, you complain about your demanding jobs, you talk endlessly about your latest achievements, your new acquisitions, and then you disappear off to your perfect, self-absorbed lives, leaving me alone in this big, empty house, yearning for a moment of genuine connection. Mark, you only call to ask about my investments, to make sure my portfolio is performing to your exacting standards. Never to ask about me, never to ask if I'm lonely, if I'm happy, if I need anything beyond financial advice. Arthur makes me laugh, he listens to me with genuine interest and empathy, he brings me simple flowers from his own modest garden, not expensive bouquets from a florist designed to impress. He doesn't see me as a bank account or a burden, he sees me as a leaner. He cares about me, not my assets. He is the only one who has offered true, selfless care, true companionship in these last few years. Mark, his face contorted in a mask of fury, his jaw clenched tight, slammed his hand on the polished mahogany dining table, making the silverware jump and clatter with a violent tremor. "He's manipulating you, Mom. He's a con artist. He's just after your money. Can't you see that? He's playing you for a fool. He's charming, yes, but it's a calculated charm, a carefully constructed facade." His words were venomous, spat out with raw aggression. I felt a surge of cold, unwavering anger, a profound sense of disillusionment that settled deep within me, chilling me to the bone. It was a searing indignation that brought a tightness to my chest, a burning behind my eyes, but it was also laced with a strange, liberating clarity. Their callous disregard for anyone but themselves, their willingness to smear a good man's name for their own selfish gain, was truly appalling. "No, Mark," I said, my voice now calm, deliberate, unwavering, but laced with an icy edge that seemed to startle even myself. "He's not the one manipulating me. You two are. You're trying to control my life, my happiness, my every decision, all for the sake of money. All for the sake of what you think you're owed, what you believe you deserve, simply because you are my biological children." I stood up slowly, deliberately, the antique dining chair scraping loudly against the intricate pattern of the Persian rug, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent dining room, punctuating the gravity of my words. "Get out, both of you. I want you to leave now." Sarah gasped again, a more genuine sound this time, her eyes filling with real, angry tears, her carefully constructed composure finally crumbling into open fury. "Mom, you can't be serious. This is our home. This is outrageous. You're losing your mind." Her voice was laced with a desperate disbelief verging on hysteria. "It was your home," I corrected, my voice unwavering, firm as bedrock, as immovable as the ancient oaks outside. "Now it's mine, and I want you to leave." They stood there, utterly stunned, frozen in place, their faces a mixture of shock, outrage, and a dawning, terrifying realization of the irreparable damage they had caused. Sarah, the seasoned litigator, was utterly speechless, her arguments dissolving into choked sobs and incoherent murmurs. Mark, the shrewd businessman, looked utterly bewildered, his usual confident demeanor shattered, his face pale and slack. They slowly, reluctantly gathered their things, their movements stiff and awkward, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and impotent rage. Sarah, still weeping, clutched her expensive handbag to her chest as if it were a shield. Mark, his shoulders slumped, picked up his phone, though he made no attempt to scroll, his usual compulsive habit momentarily forgot. I watched them walk out of my dining room, out of my front door, out of my life, a profound sense of finality settling over me, a peace I hadn't known was possible. The click of the lock as I turned the deadbolt was a definitive, liberating sound, a metaphor for the door I had just closed on their manipulative presence. The silence that followed their departure was deafening, but it was a peaceful silence, a silence filled with a profound, almost dizzying sense of liberation, a clear, crisp breath of fresh air. The very next morning, the sun seemed to shine brighter than it had in years. The air felt cleaner, lighter, purged of the suffocating weight of their unspoken judgments and their avaricious stares. The birds outside my window sang with a joyful abandon that mirrored the lightness in my own heart. I called Arthur, my voice still trembling slightly with the lingering aftershocks of the confrontation, but now with exhilaration, a fierce joy that pulsed through me. "They know," I said, a faint, almost giddy laugh escaping my lips. "I told them everything, everything, they're gone." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, then his gentle voice, filled with concern and a deep empathy. "Are you all right, Eleanor? Truly. Are you sure you're okay? That must have been incredibly difficult." "I am now, Arthur," I replied, a profound sense of lightness washing over me, as if a great, crushing burden had been lifted from my shoulders, a decades-long weight finally gone. "I'm finally free. I'm done letting them control my life, my happiness, my every decision. I'm done with their manipulations, their greed, their constant attempts to belittle my choices." Arthur came over a little later, his face etched with concern, but quickly softening into a gentle smile as he saw the new calm in my eyes. We sat on the porch swing, the same one where I had felt so alone just a few months ago, the one that now felt like a sanctuary, a haven from the storm. We talked for hours, late into the afternoon, until the shadows lengthened across the lawn and the first stars began to prickle through the darkening sky. We talked about their fear, my pain, the tangled mess of family expectations and raw financial greed that had corrupted their hearts. He never once suggested a course of action, never offered advice or judgment, never said, "I told you so." He just listened, his quiet presence a comforting balm, a solid anchor in the emotional storm I had just weathered, his hand gently holding mine. Later that week, true to my word and with a newfound sense of purpose, I called my lawyer, Brenda Wallace. Brenda was a no-nonsense woman with a sharp mind and a kind heart, a trusted confidant whom Thomas had implicitly trusted with all our legal affairs for decades. She was a woman of integrity, and I knew she would handle this with the utmost discretion and professionalism. Brenda, I need to make some significant changes to my will, I stated, my voice resolute, leaving no room for argument, no hint of hesitation. I want to leave my entire estate, including the house, all my investments, and my personal belongings to Arthur Finch. I want my children, Sarah and Mark, to be completely disinherited. Brenda was surprised, of course, a momentary flicker of astonishment in her usually composed expression. She closed the file she was working on and gave me her full attention. "Eleanor," she said, her voice serious, "are you absolutely sure about this? This is a significant change, a complete disinheritance of your children. It could lead to complications, to legal challenges from Sarah and Mark. They are likely to contest it vigorously, given their previous concerns." She chose her words carefully, hinting at their attempts to undermine Arthur without being overly specific. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Brenda," I told her, my voice firm, unwavering, imbued with a steely conviction that surprised even myself. "My children have made their choice. They have prioritized money and control over my happiness and well-being, over any genuine love or respect for me. They have shown their true colors. Now I'm making mine." Brenda, seeing the unwavering conviction in my eyes, the deep-seated resolve that pulsed beneath my calm exterior, nodded slowly. She knew me well enough to understand that once my mind was made up, it was set in stone. She drew up the new documents with meticulous care, explaining every clause, every legal ramification, every potential loophole my children might try to exploit. She meticulously documented my sound mental state and my clear intentions. I signed them without a moment's hesitation, a quiet, resolute calm settling over me. The pen scratched softly on the thick, legal paper, each stroke a definitive declaration of my independence, a sealing of my new path, a severing of old, toxic ties. The weight of the world, it seemed, had finally lifted, replaced by a lightness I hadn't felt since my youth. With the legalities settled, a sense of boundless freedom surged through me, invigorating every fiber of my being. Arthur and I began to truly live, embracing a vibrant new chapter with enthusiasm and a shared sense of adventure. We started planning the travels I had always dreamed of but never had the chance to do, held back first by Thomas's declining health, and later by my children's subtle disapproval of anything that might deplete their future inheritance. Our first trip was to the Grand Canyon, a place I'd always longed to see, its vastness and majesty a perfect symbol of the expansive new horizons of my life. Standing on the rim, hand in hand with Arthur, looking out at the vast, majestic expanse of color and light, the endless layers of history carved into the earth, I felt a sense of overwhelming awe, a profound gratitude for this beautiful, unpredictable new chapter of my life. The wind whipped around us, carrying the scent of pine and rock, and I felt utterly alive. We spent a glorious 6 weeks exploring historical sites in Europe, losing ourselves for days in ancient Roman ruins, tracing the footsteps of emperors and gladiators. We wandered through the bustling markets of Florence, savoring the aromas of fresh herbs and roasting coffee, and explored the charming cobbled streets of Paris, hand in hand, feeling like giddy teenagers. We spent hours lost in museums, Arthur sharing his vast historical knowledge with a quiet passion that ignited my own curiosity, bringing ancient civilizations to life with his vivid descriptions. We hiked gentle trails through sun-dappled national parks, marveling at the towering redwood trees that touched the sky, the rushing rivers that carved paths through the wilderness, and the quiet beauty of nature's untouched grandeur. Every moment felt precious, every shared glance a testament to the deep, abiding connection we had found, a bond forged not by blood, but by mutual respect and genuine affection. My children, meanwhile, continued their futile attempts to contact me. My phone buzzed incessantly with their increasingly desperate texts and emails, filled with pleas for reconciliation, thinly veiled threats, and always, always their familiar accusations against Arthur, recycled and rehashed with infuriating regularity. "Mom, why are you doing this? He's clearly manipulated you. This isn't like you, you're not yourself." Sarah wrote in one particularly scathing email, her words dripping with self-righteous indignation. Mark's texts were more direct, laced with raw resentment and barely concealed fury. "This is about our inheritance, isn't it? You're being vindictive. You'll regret this when he leaves you for your money." I replied to none of them. Their words, once capable of wounding me deeply, now held no power over me. Their constant negativity and accusations simply reinforced my decision. My life was finally my own, free from their judgment, their suffocating expectations, and their relentless, exhausting schemes. One sunny afternoon, a few months after our return from Europe, Arthur and I were sitting in our meticulously tended garden, surrounded by the vibrant hues of late summer roses and the sweet, calming perfume of lavender. The air was thick with the scent of blossoms and warm earth, humming with the lazy drone of bees and the distant chirping of crickets. My phone buzzed again, a jarring intrusion into the peaceful tranquility. It was a text from Sarah. "Mom, we need to talk. This has gone on long enough. We really miss you. Please just give us a chance to explain." I read it, a faint, almost pitying smile touching my lips. I showed the phone to Arthur, who was gently pruning a wilting rose bush, his movements calm and steady, utterly unperturbed by the digital intrusion. "They still don't get it, do they, Eleanor?" he mused, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "They might never, Arthur," I replied, my gaze drifting across the vibrant flowerbeds, the intricate tapestry of nature's perfect order. "Some people are too consumed by what they think they deserve, too blind to see what truly matters. They're still caught in their own web of entitlement, their own delusion of what a family should be." A few weeks later, another thick envelope arrived in the mail. It bore the return address of a prominent law firm in the city, one Brenda knew well. It was a formal letter, representing Sarah and Mark, initiating the process of contesting my will. It was thick with legal jargon, filled with accusations, portraying Arthur as a manipulative opportunist, a schemer who had preyed on my perceived vulnerability, and me as a confused, elderly woman, suffering from diminished capacity and undue influence. It was, as Brenda had predicted, an act of desperation born of their mounting financial anxieties, a last-ditch attempt to reclaim what they believed was theirs. I simply handed the letter to Brenda, who reviewed it with a professional, almost bored expression. She sighed, then gave a firm nod. "Eleanor," she assured me, her voice firm and reassuring, "the will is ironclad. We dotted every I and crossed every T. Every provision is watertight, they have no grounds. This is a futile effort on their part, a last gasp of defiance. It will be dismissed." I took a deep breath, a sigh of profound relief, the final tendrils of anxiety dissipating. I didn't seek reconciliation. I didn't want to. The idea of revisiting that toxic dynamic, of re-entering that emotional battlefield, held no appeal whatsoever. My life with Arthur was now filled with genuine joy, mutual respect, and profound companionship. We spent our days pursuing shared interests, supporting each other's passions, and simply reveling in the quiet comfort of being truly loved. We joined a local book club, debating the merits of classic literature and contemporary fiction with equal fervor. We volunteered at the animal shelter, finding immense satisfaction in caring for abandoned creatures, their unconditional love a stark contrast to the conditional affection of my children. Arthur, with his boundless patience, even taught me how to play chess, patiently guiding me through the complex strategies, and I, in turn, introduced him to the joys of competitive jigsaw puzzles, our evenings filled with the quiet click of pieces fitting together. We took up painting, our canvases slowly filling with vibrant landscapes, quiet still lifes, and surprisingly introspective portraits of each other, our creative endeavors a shared journey of self-discovery. My children, consumed by their resentment and greed, gradually faded into the background of my peaceful existence. Their accusations and demands, once so sharp and cutting, now just distant echoes, easily ignored like the faint hum of traffic from a faraway highway, barely registering. They tried, for a while, to spread rumors in our old social circles, but my true friends, like Carol, stood by me, having seen through Sarah and Mark's transparent motives and recognized the genuine happiness radiating from me. Some of my old acquaintances, swayed by the gossip, drifted away, but their absence was barely felt. I had Arthur, and a burgeoning circle of new friends from the community center and our shared activities, people who embraced me for who I was, not for what I possessed. One crisp autumn evening, as Arthur read aloud from a worn leather-bound history book, a fascinating account of the Romanov dynasty, filled with tales of opulent palaces and tragic fates, his voice a soothing cadence in the quiet living room, I looked out at the twilight descending over my garden. The last rays of sunlight kissed the tops of the trees, turning the leaves to liquid gold, and the first fireflies began their silent, blinking dance, tiny beacons of light against the deepening gloom. I thought about the emptiness I had felt for so long after Thomas passed, a void that had seemed impossible to fill. And I thought about how my children, despite being bound to me by blood, had only deepened that emptiness with their neglect, their suspicion, and their ultimate betrayal. Arthur, a man who had been a relative stranger just a year ago, had filled that void with kindness, unwavering support, and a pure, uncomplicated love that asked for nothing in return. It was a simple truth, but a profound one, echoing in the quiet chambers of my heart. Real family isn't always bound by blood, but by the love, empathy, and respect we choose to give and receive. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly, completely at peace, my heart full and content, finally free to live the rest of my life on my own terms, surrounded by genuine affection.